Some cars break speed records. Some redefine safety, comfort, design, and then there are the others. The ones that look like fever dreams, sound like sci-fi gone wrong, and drive like bad decisions. These weren't sketches on a napkin. They were built, driven, funded, some even went into production, and almost all of them were disasters. This is the story of the weirdest, wildest, and most downright unhinged cars to ever hit the road, or at least try to. It had gull wing doors, brightly colored plastic panels, and a name that sounded more like a Soviet power tool than a sports car. SV1. Built in Canada in the mid-1970s, this oddball vehicle was envisioned as the future of automotive safety. Its full name said it all: Safety Vehicle 1. Designed by Malcolm BRICKLIN, the man behind Subaru's arrival in North America, the SV1 was meant to be a bold step forward, sleek, futuristic, and above all, safe. The car's concept was radical. It featured a rust-proof plastic body bonded to a steel frame, energy-absorbing bumpers, and no cigarette lighter, because the company believed that safety started with lifestyle choices. Its dramatic gull-wing doors looked like they belonged in a sci-fi movie, and its marketing suggested that the SV1 would set a new standard in responsible, forward-thinking automotive design. But reality hit hard. Despite the promises, the SV1 was riddled with problems. The gull-wing doors, though visually striking, often jammed, especially if the battery failed, leaving drivers literally trapped inside. The acrylic panels, supposedly sun-resistant, cracked and faded when exposed to heat and light. Underneath the bold design, it lacked power steering, had weak brakes, and drove like a fridge on roller skates. Even the performance was unimpressive, hardly the thrilling experience that its sporty exterior suggested. In the end, only about 2,800 SV1s were ever made before the company went bankrupt in 1976, just 2 years after production began. Poor build quality, bad management, and a mismatch between promise and execution spelled its doom. The SV1 remains a fascinating relic, a case study in how good intentions and bold ideas aren't enough. You can sell safety, sure, but only if the car actually delivers it. It's not a toy. It's not a joke. It's the Peel P50, a real street-legal production car from the early 1960s that looks more like a child's ride-on than something you'd actually drive in traffic. Manufactured by the Peel Engineering Company on the Isle of Man, the P50 holds the title of the smallest production car in the world. And when we say small, we mean really small. Just 54 inches long, that's shorter than a standard bathtub, 39 inches wide, and weighing only 56 kilograms, the Peel P50 could literally be picked up and carried by one strong adult. In fact, that's how you were expected to reverse it, because it didn't have a reverse gear. If you wanted to back up, you'd hop out, grab the rear handle, and manually pull it into position like a suitcase with a steering wheel. It had one seat, one door, one windshield wiper, and one headlight. Simplicity was the name of the game. Under the tiny hood was a 49 cubic centimeter engine, delivering a top speed of around 37 kilometers per hour, 23 miles per hour. Just enough to get you around town, assuming you lived in a town designed for action figures. It was built with urban commuting in mind, offering just enough space to fit a single adult and perhaps a shopping bag. Parallel parking? Not an issue. You could just park it facing the curb. Despite its ridiculous appearance, the P50 was technically road legal, and a small number were sold between 1962 and 1965. Only about 50 original units were made, making it a rare collector's item today. It even earned a spot in the Guinness Book of World Records. And while it won't win any races or crash tests, you can still buy modern replicas today. They're electric, a bit more comfortable, and slightly safer. But just barely. It's more novelty than necessity. So no, it's not a toy, but you'll feel like you're driving one. What happens when you put a literal tank engine in a car? You get Jay Leno's Tank Car, a one-of-a-kind street-legal monster that looks like it rolled straight out of an apocalypse movie and into traffic. Built around a Continental AV 1790, A V12 engine originally designed to power Patton tanks in World War II and the Korean War, this machine is more artillery than automobile. The engine alone is a masterpiece of overkill. 29.3 liters of displacement, V12, air-cooled, and originally designed to push 50-ton armored vehicles across rough terrain. When it was adapted for Leno's custom car by the late hot rod legend Randy Grubb, it was tuned to produce a staggering 810 horsepower and over 1,500 pound-feet of torque, enough to tow your house and probably flatten your neighbor's SUV in the process. Weighing in at over 9,500 pounds, 4.3 metric tons, the tank car is less of a car and more of a rolling tribute to mechanical excess. It stretches nearly 20 feet long, with exposed headers, massive tires, and an unmistakable growl that can rattle windows before it even turns the corner. When Leno drives it, it doesn't just show up, it arrives, announced by a wave of sound and vibrating concrete. And yet, somehow, it's technically street legal. Yes, you can register it. Yes, it has headlights, indicators, and a license plate. But don't expect it to blend in at your local grocery store. It's too wide for some lanes, too long for most parking spots, and too loud for anyone with sensitive hearing. It's not so much a car as it is a mobile spectacle, something that demands attention wherever it goes. It's not fast. Despite all that power, it's not nimble, and it's definitely not subtle. But it does drive, slowly, majestically, like a war machine taking a Sunday cruise. And as it rolls by, pedestrians stop, drivers pull out phones, and children either cheer or run for cover. This is not just a car. This is Jay Leno's tank car. And it's utterly ridiculous in the best possible way. Imagine it's 1985. Personal computers are just beginning to appear in homes. Synthpop is on the radio. Cassette tapes are everywhere. And the future feels close enough to touch. Technology is booming. Optimism is high. And someone in Britain looks at the emerging world of innovation and says, what if we made a vehicle that's not quite a car, not quite a bike, and only barely legal? Enter the Sinclair C5, a tiny all-electric three-wheeled trike designed by Sir Clive Sinclair, the same tech visionary behind the ZX Spectrum home computer. It was compact, battery-powered, and shaped like a plastic bathtub on wheels. It had no doors, no windows, no roof, and no protection from weather, wind, or traffic. It was intended to revolutionize personal transport. Instead, it became one of the most famous failures in automotive history. The C5 was powered by a 250-watt electric motor offering a top speed of just 24 kilometers per hour, 15 miles per hour. Not exactly thrilling, even by 1980s standards. Its range was around 30 kilometers, 20 miles, on a full charge, and it required pedaling assistance on hills. You sat so low to the ground that other drivers often couldn't see you, an unnerving feature on narrow British roads filled with buses and lorries. While it technically met legal requirements to be used on public roads, it offered no safety features, no seatbelt, no lights worth mentioning, no crash protection, and a visibility profile that might as well have been stealth mode. The press mocked it, the public ignored it, and the weather, cold, wet, and thoroughly British, sealed its fate. Of the 14,000 units produced, the majority remained unsold, left sitting in warehouses or bought up by curious collectors and tech enthusiasts. Within months of launch, production ended, and the Sinclair C5 became less a symbol of the future and more a cautionary tale. Still, it has a kind of retro charm today. A bold, bizarre attempt at reinventing personal travel that was too far ahead in some ways and painfully behind in others. Because sometimes the future doesn't roar forward. Sometimes it quietly tips over in a driveway. General Motors built just 12 of them. Each one stretched nearly 10 meters long, stood over 3.5 meters tall, and weighed a whopping 12 tons. Their design was unlike anything else on the road, part bus, part spaceship, and entirely born from a vision of the future as imagined in the golden age of American industry. They weren't built to carry passengers. They weren't even built to drive particularly well. These were the GM FUTURLINERs, and their mission wasn't transportation, it was transformation. Created for the 1940 Parade of Progress, these massive vehicles were rolling exhibit halls. Picture a traveling science and technology fair designed to bring the promise of tomorrow directly to small-town America. Each FUTURLINER carried a different exhibit, ranging from jet propulsion and microwave ovens to television and agricultural automation, technologies that were barely understood by the public at the time, but that GM promised would change the world. And they didn't just show up, they made an entrance. The FUTURLINERs had retractable side panels that unfolded into stages, complete with built-in lighting and neon signage. There were onboard displays, sound systems, and even live narrators giving presentations. The styling was pure Art Deco futurism, streamlined chrome, bold fenders, and a paint job that looked like it belonged on a 1950s sci-fi movie poster. They were slow, top speed around 40 kilometers per hour, 25 miles per hour, and clunky to drive, with dual front wheels and a turning radius more suited to ocean liners than roads. But in their prime, they were awe-inspiring, rolling monuments to American optimism, designed to sell the idea that the future wasn't just coming, it was being built by General Motors. But then the future caught up. After World War II, America entered the age of the interstate highway system. Suddenly, the very roads these machines once dazzled on became too fast, too tight, and too complex for 12-ton rolling stages. The FUTURLINERs were too big to maneuver, too slow to keep up, and quickly became unsteerable relics, beautiful but impractical. Most were retired, scrapped, or lost. Only a few survive today, carefully restored and kept in museums or private collections. They remain a symbol of a time when the future was a show, and GM was determined to drive it to your doorstep. There was a time when BMW, the brand known for precision engineering and conservative German efficiency, decided to throw out the rulebook and get downright weird. The result? The GINA Light Visionary model, a concept car that had no paint, no traditional body panels, and no hard exterior at all. Instead, it was wrapped in a stretchy, translucent fabric, a skin made of polyurethane-coated spandex pulled taut over a movable metal frame like a high-tech bodysuit. That's right, this was a car with a body you could touch and slightly deform, one that moved and flexed, one that looked less manufactured and more grown. Its name, GINA, stood for Geometry and Functions in N Adaptations, a clunky acronym for a concept that was anything but. The fabric skin could shift and stretch, allowing for shape-shifting bodywork. The headlights blinked open like eyelids, revealing glowing eyes beneath. The hood didn't lift, it peeled back, splitting down the middle like muscle or skin opening to reveal the beating heart of an engine. The effect was eerie and organic. It didn't just look futuristic, it looked alive. Designed by BMW's then head of design Chris Bangle, the GINA was a philosophical statement more than a product. It challenged decades of automotive norms and asked, why does a car need to be made of steel? Why must its shape be fixed? It was lightweight, aerodynamic, and hauntingly beautiful in motion. But it was also completely impractical. One fender bender, and the fabric skin would tear like a cheap pair of tights. No crash protection, no durability, no chance of meeting safety regulations. And rain? Not its friend. It never went into production. It was never meant to. The GINA wasn't a prototype. It was a thought experiment on wheels, a moving sculpture meant to provoke, inspire, and unsettle. And that's exactly what it did. Because even the most serious car makers, brands with spreadsheets, wind tunnels, and reputations to protect, sometimes let themselves dream. Sometimes they build something just to ask, what if a car could breathe? Google ugliest car ever made, and the Fiat Multipla is almost guaranteed to show up in the top 3. Every time. Without fail. Released in 1998, the Multipla was Fiat's bold, some might say reckless, attempt to rethink the compact family car. And while it succeeded in being innovative, It also looked like two completely different cars had been fused together by someone on a tight deadline and a vague sense of anatomy. The result? A design so baffling that it became legendary. Above the hood sat a pair of bulging, bug-eyed headlights, mounted not where you'd expect, but high, way too high, almost at the base of the windshield. Below that was a second set of lights, and then a wide, stubby nose that gave the front end a kind of amphibian vibe. Think, frog wearing reading glasses. The car's stance was equally odd. It was short and wide, with awkward proportions that made it look like it was always about to tip over. Or maybe had already tipped in a past life and just shrugged it off. It was the kind of car that made children stare, pedestrians laugh, and car enthusiasts cry quietly into their oil-stained rags. But here's the twist. It worked. Despite its looks, or maybe because of them, the Fiat Multipla was a surprisingly practical machine. It featured 6 full-size seats arranged in 2 rows of 3, an innovative layout that gave it unmatched space for a car its size. It was also affordable, reliable, and easy to maintain. The flat floor and short overhangs made it a breeze to park, and the huge windows gave it great visibility. It was, by all accounts, a very smart piece of design, hidden underneath a deeply unfortunate face. And it sold well, especially in Europe, where function often wins over form. It even won Top Gear's Car of the Year in 2000, not for beauty, obviously, but for sheer practicality and gutsy originality. The Multipla became a cult classic, not loved for its looks, but respected for what it dared to be. Because sometimes ugly cars win, even if they absolutely, definitely shouldn't. Formula One is all about speed, precision, and aerodynamics pushed to the limit. Every millimeter of a car is designed to shave off hundredths of a second. Nothing is added unless it serves a purpose. Nothing is weird for the sake of being weird. So naturally, in the experimental chaos of the 1970s, someone asked, what if we gave it 6 wheels? That someone was Derek Gardner, chief designer at Team Tyrrell, and the result was one of the strangest, most unforgettable machines to ever take to a Formula One grid, the Tyrrell P34. Unveiled in 1976, the P34 didn't just break the mold, it flattened it. Instead of the usual 4 wheels, it had 4 tiny wheels up front and 2 standard-size ones at the back. The logic was bold. Smaller front wheels meant less aerodynamic drag, and 4 contact patches instead of 2 meant better grip and improved steering. On paper, it made sense. On the track, it actually worked. The P34 made its competitive debut in the 1976 Formula One season, and almost immediately began turning heads. Not just because it looked like something from a sci-fi film, but because it was fast. The car's moment of glory came at the Swedish Grand Prix, where Jody Scheckter drove it to a historic win. The only victory ever recorded by a 6-wheeled F1 car. But as with many bold ideas in motorsport, reality eventually caught up. The front tires were a custom 10-inch size that no other team used. That meant tire development depended entirely on Goodyear's willingness to continue making them. When Goodyear decided it wasn't worth the trouble, performance stalled. Without tire support, the P34 couldn't evolve. And in Formula One, standing still means falling behind. By 1978, the 6-wheeled dream was shelved, relegated to the pages of motorsport history. Still, the Tyrrell P34 remains a symbol of F1's most daring era, when designers weren't afraid to rip up the rulebook, glue on a few extra wheels, and just see what happened. Because sometimes insanity wins races, at least for a little while. Made famous by Back to the Future, the DeLorean DMC-12 is one of the most iconic cars ever built. Not because of what it could do, but because of what it came to represent. It looked like something out of science fiction, because in many ways, it was. With its brushed stainless steel body, gull-wing doors, and sleek wedge-shaped design, the DeLorean didn't look like any other car on the road in the early 1980s. It looked alien, futuristic, and impossibly cool. It was a car out of time, literally and figuratively. But under all that eye-catching metal, things were less than stellar. The DMC-12 was powered by a 130 horsepower V6, built through a joint venture between Peugeot, Renault, and Volvo. It was sluggish even by 1981 standards, taking over 10 seconds to reach 100 kilometers per hour. The suspension was stiff and awkward, designed more for show than performance. Inside, electronics and interior materials often failed, plagued by cost-cutting and rushed engineering. Worse, the car was expensive. At a time when reliable Japanese imports were hitting the market and performance cars were still affordable, the DeLorean's price tag didn't match its performance. Consumers were drawn in by the looks, but often disappointed by the drive. Behind the scenes, things were unraveling. The DeLorean Motor Company, founded by former GM executive John DeLorean, faced financial struggles, production delays, and controversies, including John's infamous entrapment in a high-profile drug sting. The scandal didn't help, but the company was already teetering. In the end, fewer than 9,000 DMC-12s were produced before the company collapsed in 1982. And yet, the DeLorean refused to die. Thanks to Back to the Future, the car became a cultural icon, a symbol of retrofuturism, a star of fan conventions, posters, toy shelves, and memes. It failed at being a great car, but it succeeded at becoming a legend. Because sometimes, legacy isn't built on success, it's built on style, ambition, and a little movie magic. Not all innovation works. Some cars are too early, some are too weird, and some are just bad ideas with great marketing. But without them, there's no progress. Because progress doesn't always drive straight. Sometimes it stalls, sometimes it crashes, sometimes it bursts into flames in front of a live audience. Yet we remember these cars, not for their success, but for their audacity. They dared to ask, what if, even if the answer was, please don't. They weren't fast, or reliable, or even practical, but they moved, they existed, they pushed boundaries, even if they broke along the way. They shouldn't have worked, but somehow they did. And that's why we remember them.